Hello and welcome back to Nordic Masters 2024. I'm Joe Larsson, joined by Andreas Peterson. We have come to show you round 12, as mentioned.
Yep. With that said, we're down to the main feature match for this round. Can you introduce the decks for us, Joel?
Absolutely. So on the left we have Rasmus Enegren with his trusty Esper Goryos Vengeance. This is a bit of a reanimated deck, but it has more layers to it, right?
Oh, for sure.
He's playing 3 Psychic Frogs in the main deck, 3 Falsies, some reactive cards like Prismatic Ending. He has some Solitudes with Ephemerate, Force of Negation, so he can definitely play kind of a Dimir Frog-esque deck.
That is true.
You know, while always kind of threatening the kind of combo finish from the graveyard. And it can even go into that kind of aggro control route even more post sideboard when your opponent has more ways to answer your graveyard, and if they take in stuff like hers or whatever card that does that, they're gonna have less cards to actually beat the frogs and the solitude. So quite nice deck.
Great point about the combo deck having multiple layers, and that's a huge strength.
Fantastic strength, yeah. And then we have Magnus Brandt, pretty straightforward Merfolk deck. Did get, however, some cards in the latest Modern Horizons deck. We have, of course, Harbinger of the Seas, which is a huge addition for this deck. Trying to play this synergistic curve, of course, Lords and powerful Merfolks, but I think Harbinger of the Seas kind of puts it over the top, if you will. You have something to actually disrupt this big mana energy, mana decks, and you can kind of buy a lot of tempo, even if they don't completely lose against the Seas. I mean, maybe it's enough time to just attack for 9 and
for sure
13, and then they're dead.
So what I find interesting here is when you're presenting both of these decks, you're basically talking about how they are not one-dimensional, how they have feature. All of a sudden we have mana disruption in like a blue blood moon type effect. The Goryos Vengeance can play more of an aggro control type of plan. So it just goes to show that the best decks in Modern usually have more layers to them, more depth.
Absolutely. So how do you feel about game 1? Who do you favor here?
Yeah, so I'm looking at Magnus's free interaction suite. So we have 3 copies of Force of Negation, 3 copies of Flare of Denial. So while those are very good in theory, there's some timing issues with Force of Negation because the Esper Goryos deck can play so well at instant speed. So maybe this will be, an eye-staring contest like the one we featured yesterday. I don't know if you remember the Dimir matchup against Esper Goryos.
Yep.
That was one of the highlights of my weekend for sure. So maybe it's going to be a bit like this. And I believe the Hex Catcher is, exactly. We see this coming in here. It is giving Rasmus a window to respond here.
I think it's interesting. If he has a Goryos Vengeance, maybe he will elect to do it at the end of Magnus, or at the end of his own turn, so at least Grisman can block for a turn.
Great point, since he had 1 mana available.
Right, exactly. You have 1 mana available, you can let it resolve. He did not have, or perhaps he had it, but elected not to cast it, who knows?
Yeah.
Instead, drawing 2 and discarding 1.
So now we have both Griselbrand and Atraxa in the graveyard, which may or may not be important. I would imagine Atraxa is better a lot of the time. Here's Silvergill Adept, showing another one. So
flopping out the cards.
Yeah, the cards are definitely both flopping and flowing on the side of Magnus here.
So this is interesting. He had my hate card, because I can't pronounce it.
Oh, Civilin.
Civilin. Yeah. I always forget what it's called, honestly. He could have casted Civilin, which is a nice card draw engine, and kind of protects your creatures. Not the best in this matchup, however. I think he just wants more bodies, so you can sacrifice for that very important Force Spike effect against Rasmus's very powerful instant sorceries.
Did you play back in Odyssey and Onslaught? Do you know Patron Wizard?
Yeah, I didn't play them, but I have played with the Patron Wizard anyways.
There were some, I don't know if it was a great deck, but when Void Mage Prodigy, Kai Buddha's Invitational card came out, people toyed around with that shell, and that card was so annoying to play against.
Like Opposition perhaps as well, right?
Yeah.
That was the same era.
Yeah, exactly. So
I remember.
A little bit of throwback here and taxing, because right now, if Magnus needs to, he has built his own mana leak here.
Absolutely, yeah. Don't really want to sacrifice your entire board against a 2-mana card, but I mean, he will if he has to, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if he can beat a Griselbrand drawing 7 in the long run.
Yeah, the problem is Atraxa most likely finds Ephemerate, and then we're kind of off to the races.
That as well,
between Solitude and the next Goryos and what have you. So
All right, so we're gonna see a prismatic ending on the Lord here.
Yep.
I like this play because now Magnus kind of has to choose whether he wants to sacrifice both of his creatures to protect it.
Yep.
Or if he just wants to let it perish. And it seems like he will go with sacrificing both creatures. I think this is fine, honestly.
It's a tough call, but it's a call you probably should make. Also, with Rasmus, he didn't deploy his land yet, so Magnus doesn't know if there's a fourth land coming. So a little bit of information gain there as well. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, probably no land or a tap land, because if he had an untapped land, he would have played it before, so make sure that it does indeed resolve.
Yeah, I'm just saying Rasmus kept Magnus guessing on the how effective is the Hex Catcher moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you know the land is coming, it's less effective, but maybe he doesn't have a land. So yeah, just great play.
All right, so he does have a Tide Shaper. He can play that and make something into an island. I'm not sure he can actually strip Rasmus off of any mana source. He will have at least one black or one white regardless.
Yep.
But elects to go with that instead of the second Lord, which I guess kind of makes sense if you already have one. I mean, don't really need the second one.
Yeah, it looks like this basic swamp is now turned into an island.
Yep. All right, so it's going to have a single black mana to work with.
I wonder if there's any advantage to turning the swamp into an island over turning the black-white surveillance into an island.
There is. If you manage to cast a Harbinger of the Seas,
yes,
the swamp won't get affected, right, and be turned into an island. So if you can resolve that, all the other lands also turns into islands, and then you've already made a swamp into an island.
Perfect. So great play by Magnus.
Yeah, heads up there. So we see a Thoughtseize from Rasmus here. Sees a hand of Island. We have a Super. We have Sevelim. I think I did it right. And then we have a Volaican Hexcatcher as well. So it's going to grab the Hexcatcher because I think, just because it's a Lord, honestly. It represents the most amount of damage.
Exactly. So it's like the when Lord of Atlantis and Cursecatcher had a baby and that card came out.
That sounds nice. We used to play both of those cards.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so Magnus gets on tap. He should be pretty happy about this because he has a pretty decent clock, honestly. He's going to attack for a grand total of 6 damage. It's not a 2-turn clock, but if he adds anything like a Lord or another creature, that should just be enough. Magnus also has a Stupor, which works kind of nicely with a Hexcatcher, honestly.
Maybe this is even 7 damage?
Yeah, sure, because of course, he gets +1/+1 because he has an island, so.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. I think it was at 14, right? So. Yeah, okay, so it is a turn clock, but we'll see if it keeps up here. Yeah, I wonder if he's going to cast Sevelim or if he's going to play Stupor here. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
He does go with the Sevelim, all right. A little scary.
Yeah, I'll say so. So the interesting part about this game is Rasmus basically only had one window to cast a good Goryos Vengeance, and he didn't have it. So this deck, if you don't find a Goryos Vengeance, you're not doing much outside of a little bit of frog shenanigans maybe. So this deck reminds me of like Oath of Druids from Vintage, where, okay, but you need to find the namesake card or the deck is not very effective, so...
Right, so Rasmus is going to get another look with his Survey land. I think it's going to go for the Fateful Mending at the end of turn. Can, of course, counter that from Magnus' side with his Catcher.
Yeah.
Probably should, but I think there's no reason not to go for it anyways, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a way to get it back.
That is a 5 mana on Earth ability on that card.
Absolutely.
And on
Earth... go for the Mending, though. I'm surprised about that. I definitely would have cast it. Just if it kills a 2/1, I think it's fine, right?
So Faithful Mending, I haven't seen that card. Was it in the opponent's hand?
No, Rasmus had it in his graveyard, I believe.
I think it was Tainted Indulgence.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yep. Okay, my mistake. Sorry about that.
The other enabler, Tainted
Indulgence,
that has flashback for 3. So yeah, definitely would have been a cool play.
We see the Ephemerate. Of course, Magnus does have the Hexcatcher, so you can play around that. Let's see if he... Okay, so he takes the obvious cards, which is the creature, the land, and the sorcery.
Yep.
Now it's getting a little trickier with the instance. Are you going to take Ephemerate here? I mean, it's not going to resolve, right?
So the thing about that is Solitude clearing the way on the Hexcatcher first can clear the way. Hexcatcher cannot deal with creatures, right?
Not to my knowledge,
It is like Cursecatcher ability.
Yeah. Yeah, let's see if Rasmus sees that play here. He does. I mean, he does know that Magnus has a stupid in his hand, however. So even if it does enter the battlefield again, you can bounce it. You get to draw another 10, of course, but
Yeah.
still, or look at 10 cards. Maybe
you
not draw 10.
You get to pick the best ones from the top 10. Yeah.
Yeah. But maybe elects to go for the next turn for Goryos, hoping he'll survive for a turn. I think this kind of makes sense, honestly.
Yeah, it looks like he found a better line than killing Hexcatcher with Solitude and then following up with another Ephemerate, or he simply just has the Ephemerate already and we don't know about it.
It's true, yeah. So I have to let this resolve for Magnus. The ward happens as well. That's the important part as well. I can't forget about.
Oh,
from Sevelin. Yeah,
perfect. I did forget about that.
Right, so you couldn't even go for the ephemerate line, but even if you could, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's
Wait, hold on. Is it? Oh yeah, it's still in play because of the priest, right? It doesn't get removed.
Oh, it wasn't even a Goryos. It was a priest,
priest,
so it's permanently in play. Okay, super cool.
So draws a card here, and then we're gonna see a stupor, I'd assume, to bounce the fact, and this should be it. All right, good game. Nice game one.
Super
awesome game
clearing
one.
the way here, and just good practice to draw your card from Sevelin first to give yourself the chance to draw into backup in case of force negation.
Absolutely. Yeah, good cash there, chat. Of course, you know everything. Cashing the ward 1. Yep. I think picking the Goryos Vengeance, even if that's the case, is probably better. But I mean, super wins regardless. Okay, here we see the sideboard.
Yeah, let's take a look here what the Esper deck can do post-sideboard against a creature strategy like Merfolk. That's most likely, the main enemies are going to be counterspells and graveyard hate. So what do you have to fight that? I would assume a card like Teferi is decent, even though it dies somewhat easily in the matchup. Look, if I was playing this deck, I would be playing 4 Psychic Frogs in the main deck. So I'm going to advocate for sideboarding that card in.
Sure. I'm looking towards like Toxic Deluge, perhaps Wrath of the Skies. Like Wrath of the Skies is a little bit expensive because Rasmus doesn't have great ways of actually gaining energy before casting it. So
it's going to be for the full amount.
Yeah, which is like 4 or 5, which is pretty tough when you're playing against potential spell piercers, hex catchers, whatever. So I think I would actually perhaps not board that in. I think I would board in Toxic Deluge though. You can think about the subtlety. It's kind of nice to get some tempo. I like the frog as well. That also makes sense to me.
Yep.
What do you not like in the main deck?
Thoughtseize? That is a pretty good question. So how many copies of Thoughtseize? We're running 3 Thoughtseize. Maybe we can trim that a little bit. I would imagine when you sideboard with this deck, you're doing a lot of trimming. Like the Force of Negation will come out here for sure. Well, actually, since we play at instant speed, it might even be okay in the matchup because it's tough. With the Merfolk deck has both interaction in hand and interaction in play, right?
I'm not loving it, honestly. I kind of agree that it's not fantastic here.
It's a bit situational, but it's part of your nut draws, so it's kind of what do you want to prioritize. But I would imagine a little bit of shaving here to upgrade a little bit between the Toxics and the Frog.
Maybe a little subtlety as well.
Yeah. I'm not big on the subtlety against like this kind of matchup.
Yeah, what do you think about Consign? Would you ever consider bringing that in against Edivile?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we're like supposed to have situational counter magic. Me neither. Okay.
I agree. All right, here we have the Merfolk sideboard. We have Dampening Sphere, we have 3 Consigns, we have 3 Subtlety, Tishana Sirebinder, and 4 Stern Scoldings.
Yeah, I think this is going to be... Well, okay, so no graveyard hate. That is interesting. So I like the Tidebinders a lot. If you can counter it like Atraxas, ETB, it should be, just a clean way to basically counter a Goryos Vengeance, and you can move on from there. Well, or will Atraxas stay in play in that case? Since it removes all the...
Nah, that's part of the Goryos Vengeance trigger ability at the end of turn, so that won't help. Okay. Although it's like, it's still a big lifelinker, you can get ephemerate, so I'm not a huge fan of. I think this is going to be the good old board in 15 cards and board out the exact same 15 cards.
Yeah, I mean that is very possible. Maybe the trick is to look at the deck and see if we have anything that's terrible in the matchup.
Sure.
Because that would incentivize you to board out, board something in. But it actually doesn't look like we have anything that.
I think it's all great. I don't know.
Yeah, it looks like a decent setup against a combo deck.
Yeah, even Merfolk Tricks are tapping like a Traxa or Grizzlebrand or whatever when it's supposed to take, or even Ulamog, even better.
Yep. Yeah.
It's pretty nice. Roshan and Dockhand. I mean, not a fantastic card, but it's fine. I think. I think you can add like 1 or 2 subtleties at max, but other than that, I think you're pretty well set up to play this game.
Oh yeah, no doubt. It looks like with Magnus' setup, he's a bit soft to just the opponent going turn 2 Psychic Frog.
Interesting. He did bring in Consign.
Okay.
Interesting.
Consign is also a card that can counter the Atraxa ETB. Like, maybe it's worth it, right?
Perhaps, yeah. I'm not a big fan, but I'm also not a Merfolk player, so
yeah.
Who the hell knows? We'll see if it bites him in the back or not. Let's see. I mean, the thing is that Magnus has to have a clock. He needs permission spells.
Yeah.
And lands, right? And Consign is like quite... it's not so flexible, right?
Because so the thing is, the bread and butter way of Rasmus of winning the game is casting Goryos Vengeance on Atraxa. And if you have Consigned Memory in that situation, you traded 1 mana for 2 mana, and you like that's good, right? That's a good 1-for-1 trade.
I guess you can counter subtlety perhaps as well. I mean that figure.
Yeah, there's a little bit of flexibility there.
Okay. I guess Magnus is trying to say he's not sure whether he's kept or not. Okay, so he's keeping. So Rasmus went down to 6, and Magnus kept it 7, I believe, and Rasmus is gonna be on play. No turn 1 play. Do you even see a creature? Okay, I see subtleties as well.
Yeah, I even saw subtleties. So a little bit more heavy sideboarding than we predicted.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I don't see another creature. Is there a mutable, perhaps? Is that the only creature except for subtlety?
Tough to say, but it kind of speaks into what you talked about. The most important thing is having pressure and disruption, like the combination. You need the combination, right?
Yeah.
You can't just have creatures and expect them to win, or you can't just have disruption and expect to win. Like, you need a combination. So that's maybe why Magnus was in the tank about this hand.
Absolutely. And it makes sense. I mean, it has lands and spells, and it looks fine, but I have a feeling this is just gonna play right into Rasmus' deck of having like frogs or like just spinning the wheels in his deck, like playing creatures like this, or playing Mendings or Tainted Indulgence, you know. Yeah,
lots of if that deck. We've seen Rasmus being very, very comfortable in these longer games where he gets to set up. We even saw him slow roll the Thoughtseizes yesterday.
Absolutely,
that's one of my favorite things as well. Like, he just showed he knows like when to play his cards and when not to play his cards, and he will take advantage of a draw go situation with 0 pressure. I'm sure.
Are we gonna say Consign perhaps? I kind of like consigning this because you have another one in your hand.
Yeah,
and it's like. Sure, your opponent gets an O3, but who cares? You know, I think you just want to be able to spend your cards that are like very. I mean, they don't work in every situation.
No,
right?
No. Good point about situational disruption. You generally want to trade if you have a target for your, your Daze, your Spell Pierce, your Stern Scolding. You oftentimes go for it, right?
See, here we see a frog, and I think Magnus is correct by subtleting this. I think you have to.
Yes.
And I kind of like this fetch and response. If you want to keep the frog, you probably want to get a survey land here. And then, okay. So we have a Hex Catcher. Okay, that's a nice draw.
Yep.
I kind of get this response. I mean, maybe he's thinking that Rasmus has some kind of 1-mana interaction or whatever. But I think just Rasmus wants to put the frog on the top. That's why he's fetching, right?
Yeah, just clean, good sequencing, fetching and response, because you want to keep this card.
Yeah. So getting a place and somewhat smart because Magnus hasn't played his third land yet, so we don't know if he has a Harbinger of the Seas. I mean, we see all the cards in their hands, so of course we know he doesn't have it, but Rasmus has no idea.
Yeah, proactively protecting yourself against a potential hate card. I think that's just quite awesome.
All right, so 3 mana here, taking another 3 from his stupor, playing a Lord of Atlantis.
And the opponent has an island, so unblockable 2 damage getting in.
So why is he tapping 3 mana here? Or is it a Cavernous?
Oh, he maybe just played it tapped.
Sure, but is that not a Mutavault, or is it a Cavernous Souls perhaps? Maybe it's a Cavernous Souls.
It is a Mutavault in the middle.
All right, but that doesn't tap for blue.
Okay. Okay. So he tapped 1 too many.
I guess, yeah. Because I think it took 3. Yeah, he's at 17. Look at that.
Okay.
All right, so pretty fast turns here. Rasmus just untaps, doesn't have another land, plays his frog, resolves. Magnus attacks with his island walking catcher.
Yep.
And passes the turn, leaving up Force of Negation, among other things. So this is the annoying part. Like, are you gonna let Rasmus draw a card in a turn? And this hurts.
It looks like the answer's yes here. And whenever you get to connect with Psychic Frog, it doesn't really matter the format. You're doing great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a line here from Magnus where he doesn't care about the frog and he just try to play this in a tempo way.
Yeah.
You take the frog, you let him draw cards, but you actually only care about the tempo, like trying to use your permission spells against the cards that are actually going to kill you.
Yep.
And I think he has a great way of doing that. Here he has another Lord of Atlantis, which is going to increase the clock by quite a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Also giving some extra protection from that island walk if he wants to leave his other Lord of Atlantis back.
Yeah, because worth noting, they don't give themselves island walk, but they give each other island walk. So
absolutely, yeah.
Pretty good point about where you, as a deck, when you're losing on card advantage, the card advantage axis, all you can do is try and reduce your opponent's life total to 0 before those cards end up mattering, right? So yeah, that would definitely be ideal for Magnus to try and finish off Rasmus. And Rasmus, sure, you can have 5 or 6 cards in hand by that time. I don't really care because I was on the board and finishing the job with my Merfolk.
Absolutely, yeah. The important part about this is that Rasmus isn't hitting his land drops, and if that's the case, it's going to be constricted on mana, trying to get something into this graveyard and then reanimating it. And having Force of Negation plus the catcher here with the cheeky little Curse Catcher 4 spikes, I think is going to do a lot. He even has a Mutavault which he can turn into a Merfolk to use as a bit of a Curse Catcher.
Build your own Curse Catcher.
Yeah.
Definitely. Great point here about the Mutavault. Even though it can't enter combat, it doesn't cast any relevant spells, but you can still activate it with the use of its own mana and get some synergies going that way.
All right, so we see end of turn, we see a frog discarding the Grizzlebrand. Okay.
And it looks like that...
just gonna let this resolve. This is quite surprising. Could he not have just countered this with like Mutavault and, I don't know, sacrificing any other Merfolk?
This may very well be...
Oh, okay. Okay, wait. Actually have a lethal... Oh, I'm such an idiot.
Okay.
Of course. I mean,
so
he's attacking for lethal, so I think Rasmus just responded by trying to draw his cards.
We're still on the attack step.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Well,
didn't find anything and he just lost the game. So he kept his counter spells for anything like that.
Yeah, which because Grizzlebrand doesn't do a whole lot on its own, right?
Quick game. Wow, Magnus just running away with that.
Yeah.
Defeating Rasmus, which was at 6 wins and a loss. So pretty nice for Magnus there. Waiting for more rounds coming up. We're gonna get back to you in a jiffy. We're gonna have Will and Simon taking over for round 13.
Yep.
And I hope to see you there after these messages.